Well, good morning still. I'd like to call our meeting to order. So good morning, member of the MAG Transportation Policy Committee. I would like to welcome Councilmember Brad Schaefer, who is replacing Councilmember Binsbacher, who resigned to run for mayor in the city of Peoria. So welcome, Councilmember Brad Schaefer.
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to be here.
And for those of you who are around the table, please turn on your microphone when speaking so that those who are on the phone can hear you. For those who are participating via Zoom, please remember to unmute your device before speaking and mute when you are not speaking to create a positive experience for everyone here and beyond. Phone participants should use a *6 to mute, unmute, and *9 to raise your hand. The MAG public comment process provides an opportunity for members of the public to comment on items scheduled on today's agenda or on items that fall under MAG's jurisdiction. 3 opportunities are provided for public comment, including a call to the audience, consent agenda, and action items to be heard. MAG also provides the opportunity for members of the public to submit written comments via the MAG website prior to the meeting, as long as the comments are received at least 1 hour prior to the posted start time for the meeting. If you'd like to comment on today's meeting, please fill out a white request to speak card located on the information table in the hallway here. Please be sure to indicate the item for which you want to speak and give it to a designated MAG staff member. If you're parked in the garage, remember to validate your ticket. Parking validators are available in the information table in the hallway. For those who purchased a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Please note that hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff as well. So with that, we're ready to begin our meeting with a roll call of all of our members. Linda, please do a roll call.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate you are present for the record. Rock Arnett, Mayor Barney, Dave Barry. Thank you. Jen Daniels. Here. Thank you. Doug DeCluson. Tom Durham.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Gallego. Mayor Giles.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
Here.
Thank you. Mayor Hartke.
Present.
Thank you. Charles Hulemantel.
Present.
Thank you. Ricardo Leonard. Carol Lombard. Mayor Orsborn.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Peterson.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Price. Mark Reardon. Supervisor Sellers.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Schaefer.
Present.
Thank you. Councilmember Stipp.
Present.
Thank you. Mayor Wires.
I'm here.
Thank you. Mayor Weiss.
Here.
Mayor Wood.
Here.
Thank you. Have I missed anyone? Chair, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Would you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our next item is a call to the audience, and I understand we have no calls, so I will skip reading that part. That's legit, right, Amy? All right. So that brings us to item number 4, which is approval of the consent agenda. Our next, this includes items 4A through 4C. Does any of members of the committee have questions or request a presentation on any of the items? Seeing none, okay. Does anyone wish to comment on any of the items? All right, seeing none. Do we have, and the same, we have no speaker cards related? Excellent. I have a move to approve by Mayor Wires. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Can I have a voice vote in this room? Please say aye.
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 Are there any nays? Seeing none, Linda, will you please do a roll call of those who are participating virtually?
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Mayor Giles.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Hall.
Yes.
Thank you. Charles Humelmantel.
Yes.
Thank you. Mayor Woods.
Yes.
Thank you. Chair, the motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Item
Chair,
number,
this is Mayor Price. I'm online as well and I vote aye.
all right. Thank you, Mayor Price.
Mr. Chairman, maybe I missed it, but did we do a voice vote of those in the room?
Yes, we did.
Oh, we did. Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
We snuck it in when you weren't looking. All right. Item number 5 is a draft fiscal year 2023 Freeway Life Cycle Program. This is an action requested on this particular item. So with that, let me turn this over to Arminta Syed, MAG Transportation Planner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of TPC. I'm here today to provide an overview of our Freeway Lifecycle Program update. Next slide, please. So our Freeway Lifecycle Program is the management tool that we use to implement our freeway and highway projects that were funded through Proposition 400. Every year, we update the program to reflect the latest revenue forecasts, updated project cost estimates, as well as any other minor project changes such as in scheduling. This item is an overview for our draft fiscal year 2023 program. Next slide, please. So just a quick refresher, our Freeway Lifecycle Program is funded primarily through 3 revenue sources. The first being Proposition 400, what is also known as the half-cent sales tax. About 56% of these are deposited into the Regional Area Road Fund for use on our freeway. We also have state highway operating fees and taxes, which are deposited into the Arizona Highway User Revenue Fund for use on our state highway system. And then finally, we have federal aid highway program funding, which is allocated to the MAG region through the Arizona Department of Transportation. Next slide, please. So this table in front of you provides the total forecasted funding used in the FY23 program broken down by each of the revenue sources. It also compares it to the total forecasted funding used in the fiscal year 22 program. With the first 2 revenue sources, RARF and HERF, as you can see, we've seen an increase of about 14 and 11% respectively. Then with the with the federal funding that is allocated to MAG through ADOT, as you can see, the numbers for both programs remain largely the same. This is because they use the old Surface Transportation Act, the FAST Act. As most of you are aware, that will be replaced by the new federal legislation, the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act. So we're just waiting to get some further details regarding the allocations to the MAG region from ADOT, and then we'll incorporate them into the program, at which point we expect to see the total funding forecasted increase. Next slide, please. So on the project side, as part of our annual update, we'll follow the 3 steps that are shown on the screen in front of you. First of all, we work very closely with ADOT to develop updated project cost estimates on a biannual basis, so we can ensure that our program is reflecting the latest cost estimate. Then we'll also consider the latest construction cost index projections that are provided on an annual basis from ADOT Finance. And then finally, we'll also look at minor project changes such as in scheduling. And if we go to the next slide, I can provide an overview of the notable changes that were included in the fiscal year 23 program, which are also showing, excuse me, on this map here in front of you. So starting at the top of the map, the construction funding program for the 2 interchanges off Loop 303 Estrella Freeway on 43rd and 51st Avenue have increased to include additional items that were identified during final design. Moving down, keep staying along Loop 303 Estrella Freeway, the MC 85 to Van Buren Road, we were able to advance construction of that 2 fiscal years into fiscal year 2025. And then the last project shown on this map in front of you, Loop 202 on Santan, Val Vista Drive to 101, we were able to do the same thing and advance construction 2 fiscal years into fiscal year 2024. Next slide, please. So this map shows our fiscal year 2022 program in review. The map here in front of you shows 9 projects that were actively under construction throughout the fiscal year. The 3 that are shown in blue have since opened to traffic. Starting at the top, we have on Loop 303, project number 9 there from Happy Valley to Lake Pleasant Parkway. Number 7 on the map from Loop 101 Pima from I-17 to Pima Road. And then number 5 at the bottom of the map there from I-17 and Central Avenue Bridge, excuse me. Next slide, please. And then this is the same map, except this one is showing, this one is looking ahead at the fiscal year 2023 program, showing the 2 projects that we plan to advertise for construction in fiscal year 2023. So starting at the top, number 1, which I previously mentioned, the 2 interchanges on Loop 303 Estrella at 51st and 43rd Avenue. And then we also have another project on Loop 101 Pima from Princess Drive to Shea Boulevard. Next slide, please. So that is pretty much the overview of the draft program. There are a few things you can expect from us in terms of next steps. So first of all, some of these changes are contingent on finding of an air quality conformity. We'll be taking those through as tip amendments as part of the next committee cycle, and then we'll formally adopt the program. And then as previously mentioned, we are waiting for some further details regarding those IIJA allocations, and that will also be incorporated into the program. And then that coupled with what we hope will be a successful ballot measure this fall to extend Proposition 400, that'll set us up in a really good place to start beginning that much larger work. And next slide, please. So that concludes my presentation today. Just a quick reminder again that this item is we are requesting action on this item today to recommend approval of the draft fiscal year 2023 Freeway Lifecycle Program, contingent on finding of an air quality conformity, but I'm happy to take any questions before that.
Thank you, Ramenta. Are there any questions from the committee? Hearing none.
I'll make a motion.
Let me see if there's any from online first.
Oh, there won't be. Don't worry about it.
All right. Wow. Are there any questions from online? Hearing none. Mayor White, you are prophetic.
What was that word again?
Prophetic.
Okay, good. Thanks.
I didn't say pathetic.
I was checking. Yes, I'd like to make the motion. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion and second. Any additional comments, recusals for any reason? Seeing none. Let's take a voice vote here. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. And can you please poll our online participants?
Thank you, Mayor. Can you tell me who made the second? I didn't see who made the motion.
Mayor
Thank you
Osborne.
so much.
Sorry, I didn't point that out.
Thank you, Chair. When I call your name, please indicate how you vote. Mayor Giles.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Hall.
Yes.
Thank you, Charles Hulemantel.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Price.
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Woods.
Mayor Woods?
He's on there. He must be having some difficulty, audio difficulty.
All right. Moving on.
Motion passes.
Motion passes. Item number 6 is the agenda will be presented by John Bullen, MAG Economic and Finance Program Manager. This item on the agenda is for information and discussion only. John.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the TPC.
I like your tie, by the way.
Thank you. Very happy to be here to give an update on State Route 30, quite a popular project, and it's been a while since we've been able to provide this body with an update. So very excited to join you today and let you know about all the incredible activities taking place for the development of this corridor. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick overview of the presentation. I'll start by providing some context for this project's history. This is a project that's original to Proposition 400. Then I'll transition to where we are at today with some of the current efforts that are underway, and finally conclude with what to expect moving forward. Next slide, please. So I'll quickly begin with the project history. Next slide. So before I begin, I wanted to orient this group and provide some context. So when we talk about State Route 30, there's actually 3 different segments to State Route 30. There's the western segment that extends between State Route 85 and Loop 303. We conveniently refer to that as the State Route 30 western segment. And then there's the center segment between Loop 303 and Loop 202. That is the segment that will be the focus of today's presentation. And then finally, there's the eastern segment between Loop 303, or excuse me, Loop 202 and I-17. Next slide, please. So as I had mentioned, State Route 30, the center segment, is a project that's original to Proposition 400. So going back in time, the 2003 Regional Transportation Plan, which was approved by the MAG Regional Council in November of 2003, actually served as the basis for the Proposition 400 ballot initiative. That planning document identified the need for a reliever facility to I-10 south of I-10 itself between Loop 303 and Loop 202. And that was needed primarily to address the congestion that we're seeing on I-10, which we certainly see today, as well as to accommodate the significant freight movements in the area. Next slide, please. So following adoption of the 2003 RTP, MAG quickly went and received enabling legislation in February 2004, followed by a successful vote from the voters in November of 2004. Just to put that into context, the voters approved Proposition 400 in November 2004, and the revenue started collecting that following January of 2005. Meaning that there was a very quick turnaround from the planning phases, if you will, to the actual implementation. So there was a massive effort underway in 2005 to initiate much of the development for the work in Proposition 400, including State Route 30, where ADOT initiated the first step in the development process. Next slide, please. So just to touch on that development process, when we're talking about developing these large projects, large freeway projects, large freeway widening, even the large high capacity transit projects, there's several different phases involved in that effort. The first phase is what we call the design concept report and planning, or environmental document, excuse me. This is traditionally the longest phase. It takes quite some time. I'll touch on this point a little later. But once that has been concluded, we can begin to acquire right-of-way, as well as start final design of the facility before the final phase that we all know and love, which is construction. Next slide, please. So the graphic up on your screen represents the first phase for the development effort of the center segment of State Route 30. It was first initiated in June of 2005, and it did not conclude until April of 2020. That's a very long time, as you see, and there's a variety of reasons for that. The study was put on hold several times due to economic conditions that I'll touch on, but perhaps more importantly, it's an extremely complex project. These things take a lot of time. They take a lot of working with the public, getting public input. They take a lot of very specific assessment for the corridors. And I just want to impress upon you the amount of time that it actually takes. Next slide, please. So the image on the screen gives context of State Route 30 in terms of where it was in the program. So as I had mentioned, State Route 30 was first initiated in June of 2005. And the DCR environmental document wasn't actually approved until all the way in April of 2020. I do want to pause for a moment and emphasize an important point here. As we talk about developing several of these large corridors, I think it's really important to consider the time that it actually takes. There's been a lot of discussion down at the state legislature. As we know that there's a budget surplus this year, the state legislature is allocating a lot of that money. But really, when you're talking about these large corridors, what you really need is a stable ongoing revenue source. State Route 30 took about 15 years to get through that design and environmental process. South Mountain's another illustration of a project that took a long time. So I really want to impress the need for the extension of Proposition 400, particularly as we look at some of these large projects. We need that stable revenue source moving forward. In any event, back in June, ADOT initiated the DCR. Fast forward a couple of years, the Great Recession started. We all know what financial impact that had. The first freeway rebalance was actually approved by the MAG Regional Council in 2009. As part of that rebalance, right-of-way acquisition and construction of this segment of State Route 30 was pushed out beyond the funded program. Fast forward about 10 years, in 2017, the region actually had a surplus in the freeway program. And so as part of that, a portion of the State Route 30 facility was brought back into the program. At that time, it was identified as an interim 2-lane arterial roadway with some money for right-of-way acquisition. Shortly after that approval, MAG and ADOT really began to look at some of the detailed financials related to the program. And it was determined that the project costs actually exceeded the available revenues. And so that initiated the last freeway rebalance, which many of you are familiar with. As part of that effort, we actually increased the amount of funding allocated to this section of State Route 30. However, instead of trying to construct an interim facility, that funding was concentrated on right-of-way acquisition and advanced utility work. And I'll talk a little bit about that here shortly. Next slide, please. So where are we at today? Next slide. So the image on the screen shows what the cross-section of State Route 30 is envisioned to look like. Much like many of our freeways across the valley, this will be a phased effort, with the first phase being construction of a 6-lane facility. So 3 lanes in each direction. We saw this with the Loop 101, the Loop 202, the Loop 303, State Route 30, similar position. So as part of the extension of Proposition 400, the first phase of that facility is funded for construction in phase 1. The DCR identifies an ultimate 10-lane section. So that's 4 general purpose lanes in each direction with 1 high occupancy vehicle lane. Next slide, please. And another, I think, important aspect of State Route 30, we talk about how critically important it is, and there's a reason we talk about that. And that's because that facility will be carrying a lot of traffic. So the image on the screen demonstrates 2050 daily traffic volumes. They are significant. So as you look at the facility, volumes in the west start to pick up as you head further east, with the most volumes being close to the Loop 202 interchange at just over 180,000 cars per day in 2050. As a basis for comparison, for those of you that live out in the West Valley, Interstate 10 between Loop 303 and Loop 101, comparable volumes there. And then down in the East Valley, the 202 Santan, right around the interchange with Loop 101, similar volumes there. So it will be a very busy facility once it's constructed. Next slide, please. So in terms of the implementation plan, which is a fancy way of saying the construction plan for the facility, is actually identified as part of the DCR. Sort of corresponding with the traffic volumes, it's always been planned to construct from the east further west. I think a good analogy for this is if you look at constructing a drainage system, you look at constructing downstream first before you go upstream. So the first segment of State Route 30 to be implemented is that eastern segment. So it's the Loop 202 interchange, extending further to 97th Avenue, extends a little beyond 91st Avenue, largely to accommodate drainage. This is actually 2 different projects that are pieced into one, and that's for several reasons. Number one of the biggest challenges with this corridor is drainage, as you might imagine, being right near the river. So you need to actually build the portion over to 97th Avenue to accommodate that drainage work. And also, 67th Avenue doesn't really represent a good end of freeway condition for the facility. You wouldn't want to put cars on a facility immediately going into an interchange itself. So for purposes of considering State Route 30, really the first section to be implemented would be that section between 97th Avenue and the 202 interchange. As part of the extension of Proposition 400, one of the other efforts that we're actually looking at with ADOT is whether or not we can begin construction on some of the western elements concurrently, if you will. And the objective there is to try and build this facility as quickly as possible. So is it possible we could build the section between Loop 303 and Estrella Parkway so that the last section would be built, would be the middle section, if you will. Nonetheless, the goal is to have the entire facility under construction by the end of phase 1 of the extension. Next slide, please. So as part of the current Proposition 400 freeway program that Ms. Saeed just presented, we have more than $562 million programmed for advanced utility work, as well as right-of-way acquisition. In total, there's 462 parcels that need acquired. So it's a lot of parcels. In addition, as we talked about during the last freeway rebalance, there's a water line, a very sensitive water line that runs along many parts of the corridor that has to be encased in concrete. That's very laborious work, it's expensive work, and it's work that can only occur 2 times a year. So you have to stretch that out over a number of years. Next slide, please. So following the freeway rebalance back in 2019, 2020, ADOT initiated a right-of-way management plan. This was the first time that ADOT actually pulled together a coordinated right-of-way management plan to try and prioritize and address parcels. So this plan was created in cooperation of some of your city staff, particularly the planning department, who have the best idea of where and when development is coming in. So it included participation from Avondale, Goodyear, and Phoenix. As part of this right-of-way management plan, parcels were really categorized into one of 3 categories. The first category was those parcels that are most susceptible to development. So again, ADOT's intent is to try and get in there ahead of development so that prices don't increase. The second priority is what we call specialty and long lead time. So there's several parcels throughout the corridor that are either sand and gravel operations, either currently active or recently active, as well as dairy farms. Those take a very long time to acquire and a very long time to remediate. And then the third priority, to put it into simple terms, is everything else. Next slide, please. So the graphic on the screen shows the status of right-of-way acquisition through February of this year. Pleased to report that more than half the parcels have either been acquired or are in the process of being acquired. So significant accomplishment by ADOT right-of-way staff. This is one of their major efforts. They have a lot of resources focused on this corridor. Next slide, please. And building on that, this is a graphic that further breaks down where we're at with pending acquisitions and acquisitions that haven't started. We have 119 that have already been acquired. And then you can see the breakdown by priority 1, priority 2, and priority 3. Priority 1 continues to be the emphasis point, though with the potential for construction in the near term, ADOT has reoriented its efforts to try and get all those eastern parcels acquired. Next slide, please. As for the utility efforts, significant progress has been done. ADOT and APS have been working closely together. Final design of that encasement is underway, with construction anticipated to start very soon. And fortunately, we are on schedule to complete the entire encasement by 2026. Next slide, please. So looking ahead, next slide. So we do have final design programmed for that first section of the corridor between 97th Avenue and Loop 202. In fact, in a matter of weeks, ADOT will be advertising for a final design consultant team to begin work on that section. Concurrent with that, MAG will also be initiating an active transportation study to complement efforts of State Route 30. So again, recognizing all the really unique attributes about the corridor, the fact that it runs along the river, the fact that there's quite honestly, a lot of development going in there, wanting the opportunity to get out in front and figure out how we can integrate a more holistic, more complete transportation effort into that project. We also continue to coordinate very closely with member agency staff. And as I have noted, construction is funded in phase 1 of the extension. Next slide, please. So key takeaways. Number 1, there has been significant progress underway. While there haven't been a lot of news stories talking about construction of this facility, ADOT has been very diligently working at prepping this corridor and getting it ready for construction. I think one of the key takeaways, really looking back on that rebalance effort from a couple of years ago, I think it really reaffirms the decision made by this body to really focus the funding in right-of-way and utility work, knowing that those are long lead items and there was no way that that was going to be able to be completed in as aggressive of a time frame as, quite honestly, anybody wanted. We know how critical this facility is. As demonstrated by the volumes, there's a lot of traffic that's going to be using this facility. It is a very important link for regional mobility. And I think to underscore that, that's one of the reasons why we really need enabling legislation. In fact, we're still waiting for the final information from the new Federal Surface Transportation Act, still waiting for some of the inflationary cost increases. But that being said, I think with the financial position we're in, if we do get enabling legislation this year, if we are able to go to the voters, we could see construction, we could see ground break as soon as calendar year 2024. So it's a very near-term effort. We certainly need to get that underway. Next slide. And with that, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. What questions do we have? Jen Daniels.
Thank you, Chair. Would you mind going back to the implementation slide?
Sure.
That one's perfect. Yeah, thanks. The connector between the new State Route 30 and the 303 extension is a different design than I feel like I've seen previously. Is that a preliminary? There could be a different type of alternative. It seems a little bit less efficient, if you will, than something I've seen previously.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Daniels, good question. So that design actually came out of the Loop 303 environmental and scoping document. So in part, that's taken into consideration a number of things. Number one, there's a railroad down there that adds a layer of complexity there. There's some historic properties that need missed as well. And then ultimately to sort of the interface interaction with MC85. So that was actually a result of formalized analysis and study.
And is there a location that we could find the new Loop 303 connector documents? I think that's a critical component of the 30.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Chairman, Ms. Daniels, it is available on ADOT's website, but I'm happy to also send that link directly to you.
I probably should have known that. Thanks.
Additional questions or comments? Mayor Weiss.
Honestly, I appreciate the update on this. I get questions on this all the time. I know I'm not alone. And I don't have an issue. The discussion was always that the center part was going to be the initial construction. And I understand the reasoning for going east to west. Hopefully we can build west and east at the same time, because I think it makes sense for this project. The thing I was surprised about and pleased about, and we can move forward to the acquisitions on the slides. Yeah, I appreciate that we're ahead of where I thought we would be. And I saw like nodding heads. I think this is incredibly important. There is a lot of development happening down in that area. And I think what happens is when landowners find out that a major project's coming in, they have a tendency to want to get the top dollar for their properties. The one that concerns me the most is the rock and quarry operations there. Can you give us some insight into how that's working and what has been, because you said something that I found was interesting. You said not operating and currently operating. So can you go into kind of where we're at in the process with that?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mayor Weiss. So there's, if I remember correctly, I think there's two sand and gravel operations that are specifically concerned. Both of them are no longer under current operation. So one of the first actions that ADOT took was actually to begin to initiate efforts with them. However, there are large pits there and those will need to be remediated. So ADOT continues to work through that effort, but pleased to say that work has stopped on both of those.
And I think it's important for the body to understand that when we talk about building this corridor, it's not a standard freeway corridor. It can't be. You talk about the sensitive water line that is incredibly important, but the amount of power lines that are there. And then there's a lot of projects happening in Goodyear, and I have Councilmember Stipp touch on that if he wishes, but there's a lot of power going into this area for large projects. But the one that a lot of people don't understand is there's a lot of wetlands projects down there. For us, the Tres Rios is incredibly sensitive, and this freeway has to be able to complement that. So I appreciate the touching on that, but we're further ahead than I thought we would be on the acquisitions, and I'm happy to see that.
Thank you, Mayor Weiss. Any additional comments? Weiss, close. All right.
I do have
Uh,
maybe a couple quick questions. How are the parcel acquisitions going compared to budget?
Chairman Harkey, Mayor Osborne, very good question. So, initially I think there was some very favorable returns. And so fortunately, ADOT was able to get out in front and acquire some of those parcels. There's no question that we're seeing cost escalation. And we've built in some of that with the inflationary factors, but that's another area that we're going to have to continue to visit. Fortunately, one of the benefits of the right-of-way management plan is that we can be very strategic with what we acquire and when. And in particular, if you look at some of the final design efforts that will soon be initiated on the eastern edge of the project, we will then know what the exact footprint of the freeway is. So ADOT could even look at selling some of those excess parcels and infusing money back in. So we've been closely monitoring it. We haven't had to significantly increase the budget, but it's certainly something been very closely in tune with.
Okay, and then my last question is on that the plan that we had up there a minute ago, showing the entire stretch. So Loop 202 was built with one continuous contract. Has there been any consideration in doing each of these phases of State Route 30 that same way?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the TBC, that's a very good question and a topic that we frequently discuss with ADOT. I think, a couple of areas to really highlight. First, to put it into perspective, South Mountain Loop 202, the total contract size was 1.1 billion. Total construction cost for this facility is 2.1 billion. So while South Mountain was big in and of itself, it still needed another billion to get to that. That puts a big strain on labor and materials. I think one of the particular challenges looking forward is the cost certainty or some of the risks that contractors might price into it, knowing that really there's a premium for certain materials. There's a premium for some of your structural materials. There's a premium for concrete right now. And so one of the concerns I would have about doing that as one big contract is the current marketing conditions don't necessarily lend themselves to that big design build contract. Instead, that's why we've sort of looked at trying to assess whether or not we can build from both sides so that we still get the benefit of getting that facility open as quickly as possible, but perhaps without some of the cost impacts that you might otherwise see.
All right, thank you very much.
Councilmember Stipp.
I do not have
What? I work with Councilmember Stipp on Valley Metro, and enough said. All right. Seeing no additional comments, thank you.
Thank you.
And next up is our legislative update with Nathan Pryor. Nathan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Transportation Policy Committee. Welcome to day 129 of the state legislative session. So of course, our focus remains on Senate Bill 1356, the extension of the half-cent sales tax for transportation in Maricopa County. My report is not very different from what we heard from John McDonald and Policy AZ last month when he presented to the TPC and Regional Council. Of course, budget discussions are ongoing. We continue to reach out to House members and encourage them to ensure that there is a vote on 1356. Of note, in recent weeks, we are picking up considerations of a potential bipartisan budget. With that noted, BAG member agencies have reached out to key Democrats to keep 1356 top of mind in these conversations. And so for that bill to receive a vote. So that's where we're at. We really appreciate member agencies being vigilant, on point, visiting with particular House members to keep 1356 top of mind, not to lose sight of that as other issues are being discussed and of course the budget being developed. I do want to note on May 5th that Governor Ducey did sign $400 million allocating to I-10 through the Gila River Indian community. This is part of the effort to apply for a mega grant through U.S. Department of Transportation So this is a significant lift here. It is bipartisan effort, getting that bill through and the governor signing. Do want to thank Mayor Hartke for attending the signing in his role as chair of the TPC. So thank you, Mayor, for that. But we're encouraged by the positive media attention that it received. The fact that there was a bipartisan bill, it was signed by the governor, it was focused on transportation investment. We're hoping that that message continues on as we, again, advance 1356, looking for that bipartisan support and of course the public's understanding of continued transportation investment in our region. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Any questions? Jen Daniels.
Just one on timing, recognizing we've missed a couple deadlines already on 1356. Can you help us understand or help me understand what next steps will be as far as getting that on the ballot for November?
Right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Daniels, 1356 originated out of the Senate. Thank you to Senator Pace for sponsoring that legislation. When it did go through the Senate, it had enough votes to retain its emergency clause. That's very important. And I appreciate the point. The emergency clause in the bills allows us to take action quickly. So that means the county needs to call the ballot to the attention of the voters. So there's a process there. We're coming up close, to be quite honest. So recognizing that the county needs to work through that, we do need to continue with keeping that enabling the emergency clause intact, as well as we go through the House, so we can ensure that, of course, we're working with the county, and especially in the month of June, July, to work diligently to meet that. So this has always been a consideration all along, recognizing that the longer the session goes on, it is more of a challenge, undoubtedly. But we're going to remain optimistic that we'll retain that emergency provision and work with the county diligently to get this on a ballot for November.
Any additional comments or questions?
Just a follow-up, Mr. Chair. It's a great question. What is the drop dead date? Is there a drop dead date? And I hate using that term, but I'm going to use it. For us to be able to, for the county to get the information that they need to put this on the ballot. Let's say the enabling legislation passes, but what's the date that or is there one?
Mr. Chairman, Mayor Weiss, we can work back to the county to identify a specific date. We've had ongoing conversations with the county throughout this effort, but we can work with the county to identify a date.
All right, seeing no additional questions, thank you. Next on our agenda is requests for future agenda items. Are there any requests by a TPC member for a future agenda item? Seeing none. Last comments from the committee. Are there any comments by a TPC member for a future of anything related? Seeing none. I just want to thank MAG again for their work on that Prop 4, on that 400 million and the extension of I-10. That was a big lift, and all those who helped support that. It furthers our needs and goals. And with that, meeting adjourned.
With you, or is that always there?
It's a good question.
I don't remember us having. Yeah.